Hello and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to introduce to you today. Jen Stevens is a wife, mother, retired teacher, and intermittent faster. If that wasn't enough, she is also a New York Times best-selling author of the book Fast, Feast, Repeat. She is the author of the Amazon #1 bestseller, Delay, Don't Deny. In total, she has 5 books available for purchase on her website, where you can also find her blog, success stories, and other fantastic resources. She is the host of 3 podcasts. Wow, 3 podcasts. I have a hard enough time just with one, including the Intermittent Fasting Podcast and Intermittent Fasting Stories. Her latest podcast is called Life Lessons, which she hosts with her friend Sherry Bullock. Jen is a ray of light, a beacon of positivity and optimism, and it is a joy and honor to host her here today on Boundless Body Radio. Jen Stevens.
Aw. Thank you so much. Yeah, that does sound crazy when you read it all out. I'm also working on a new book, and my deadline is the end of March. So I don't know. I don't have enough to do. I'm juggling cats.
Do you know what sleep is? Like, do you ever sleep?
Yeah, I actually do. I am one of those people that I'm 100% on or I am off.
Wow.
I go to bed, pretty early. I'm usually in bed by 9 p.m. and I wake up early in the morning and
1 in the morning, 2 in the morning to get all this done?
Well, I wait. And I have my alarm clock set so that the light doesn't come on until 5:30. So I can't tell what time it is until 5:30. And so if it's still dark, I know it's not time to wake up.
That's a good way to do it. Wow. Yeah, your podcasts are great. I love all of them. They're all very unique and different. They have kind of a different vibe from each other. And I really enjoy all of them for what they are. I really love the one about the stories. It's so, I think, cool and validating for myself and other people who want to try fasting to hear that, other people are succeeding with it.
Absolutely. And no matter who you are, there's someone like you who's out there telling their story. We're a diverse community, people all over the world, and, people who only needed to lose a tiny bit of weight, and people who needed to lose, 200 pounds, people who were, pretty healthy, but just, struggling with weight loss versus people who had really tremendous health struggles, that may have been even lifelong. But the one thing we have in common is that intermittent fasting has helped bring, health to us, sanity to our lives, and helped us, really, most of us find that we can love food again.
That's so awesome. Fasting, it's just so interesting. It's such an interesting thing. I want to talk to you. I used to fast once a month for religious purposes, and it was, a 24-hour fast. And boy, that month would be like one day of being utterly miserable and hating it. And then the rest of the month, just looking forward to the next time I would have to do it. And those days are all miserable because you're thinking about, I'm going to have to do that day of nothing. I can't eat any food. And now fasting has become, for me personally, incredible. It's easy. It's amazing. You feel great. How does something miserable turn into something that's amazing? It's the best thing ever.
Well, our bodies are, adaptable, and we are meant to be, the wording is metabolically flexible. That means that we're supposed to be able to draw on our stored fat for fuel when food is scarce. That's why it's there. And we're supposed to, be able to run on the food we're eating, when we're eating. Unfortunately, in modern times, with all the plenty that is around us, we've gotten used to being in the fed state the whole time that we're awake. And so our bodies have lost the ability to tap into fat stores for fuel, which sounds crazy, but we've all been there. Like you said, those 24-hour fasts that you did once a month, you probably felt hangry and miserable the whole day because your body was not metabolically flexible. It's not just like you could flip that switch and then now you're fine. You have to train your body how to do it. And the adjustment period is the hardest part of intermittent fasting. So every time you had that one monthly fast, you were having to go through that, adjustment. You never adjusted because you didn't, get up and do it the next day. So, you were trapped in that adjustment phase forever.
That's right. That's right. And then, diet back then is 20 years ago. I'm eating peanut butter jelly sandwiches and skim milk and all the red vines I can find and granola bars and yogurts. That's not exactly like the best diet to be able to do that. I want to deep dive into fasting with you, but I want to hear a little bit about your story. You have a really unique story of how you found fasting and it was part of your life, but not fully integrated until a little later on. So can you tell me a little bit about how you found fasting and why you decided to implement that in your life more regularly?
Yes. I first found out about intermittent fasting or first read about it in probably around 2009. I was, on the diet roller coaster of ups and downs, searching for something that would provide sanity and a framework for my life where I could just, forget about food and just eat. But that thing, kept not being there. So I tried everything along the way. But in the meantime, I read about fasting and I would dabble in it here and there. I would try a plan. I would try, having maybe an 8-hour eating window for a while or a 5-hour eating window, or I would try alternate daily fasting. There were some books out there about that. Or, Brad Pilon's Eat, Stop, Eat, where you just would have like 3 days a week or 2 days a week where you would just go for 24 hours. The problem is I never gave my body time to adjust. Like I would try a 5-hour window for 3 days in a row. And then I would be like, this is really hard. And then I would quit doing it. And then a month later, I'd be like, well, that really does sound like something I would like. And I would try again, or maybe 3 months later. And so, of course, it never got easier. And I would just, throw it by the wayside. Still, whenever I read about it, I was like, this has really got to be the answer because it sounds so simple. But of course, I didn't understand about metabolic adaptation. Really, no one was talking about that. The whole idea of intermittent fasting was just viewed as a way to eat fewer calories, whether it was a couple days a week, as in like a 5-2 plan, or if it was, within a daily eating window. And so we didn't really understand the hormonal and metabolic benefits that go along with actually fasting and as your body changes and adapts. Then in 2014, I went on a family vacation. We went on a cruise. It was 7 days. And, those were back in the days when I was really eating all the time. I remember being on that cruise ship. We would get up and have breakfast. I would drag my family to the sit down breakfast. Then I would drag them to the sit down lunch, sit down dinner. We would have snacks throughout the day. I can't believe how much I would eat. And I remember formal night. We all, got up on deck and where they do the family portraits. And I looked at that family portrait and I could not believe that was me. When I got home from the cruise, I got on the scale and I was 210 pounds. And I'm 5'5", so that was obese. And that was really a wake-up call for me. And I felt miserable on the cruise. I remember we went to the Mayan ruins and it was so exciting to be there and walking up the pyramid. And I could barely move my body up the pyramid. And moving through the day was so hard. So I was like, I've got to do something. And that's when I really decided this time it's going to be different. So I went on to, I didn't immediately go back to fasting. I tried something else crazy first, a crash diet. And of course, those are unsustainable. But then I was like, you know what is better than this crazy diet that I'm doing? Intermittent fasting. So at that point in 2014, it was August. And I began doing intermittent fasting at that point, and I have not stopped doing it since. I went on to lose, my initial goal was to lose 75 pounds. I thought that 135 sounded like a great weight for my body. I got there in 2015, and I went on to lose about 5 more pounds. Although I no longer weigh myself, I've been in the same maintenance range since 2015. And so you can see it's been almost 6 years as of today that I've been maintaining the weight loss. And it's just really amazing. I'm 51. I've been through menopause. I'm on the other side. And I maintained my weight through it all, thanks to intermittent fasting.
Wow. I think that's a really good example and a really interesting thing that I like to tell my clients and I like to talk about. So go back to that trip on the cruise when you're eating and snacking and eating and snacking all the time. And that's taking up a considerable amount of your time. Contrast that to like a normal day now, or like maybe another vacation that you went on where like you can go eat if you want to, but you could also not go eat and go have a blast and enjoy things. And like the Mayan ruins, that sounds amazing. And like, I guess like for me today, like I wouldn't even give it a second thought if I ate or not. It wouldn't really impact my day. Like contrast those two things.
Well, like for example, now, if I went on that same family cruise right this minute, and we were going to go to the Mayan ruins, I would not eat before we went. I would go in the fasted state because I would have so much more endurance and stamina to go up and down the pyramids as much as I wanted to while in the fasted state. Then I would wait until we got back on the ship, assuming we'll cruise again one day when the pandemic is over.
So good.
You had to throw that in there. But that's one thing I miss is cruising. Anyway, totally. I would wait till I got back on the ship. And then I would find something that was delicious because it would probably be, late afternoon by that point. And I would open my window with something delicious. Later, I like to do the late dining on a cruise. So I would go to the dining room, maybe 8:15 for dinner. And, I look for things. I tend to, on a cruise, eat more vegetarian style because, number one, those are the meals that are often the best coming out of the dining room. They tend to be better prepared for whatever reason. And I can eat, delicious food. I would have dessert, but I wouldn't feel overly stuffed. So I don't get off the ship. I mean, I do get off the ship full because I eat more on a cruise than I do at home. But soon, I remember the last day of a cruise when it was time to disembark, we would get up and go eat breakfast in the dining room before we would leave. And then now I would never do that. We just have, coffee, and then we get off the ship, we go home. I don't eat till I get home. And it's just, I feel so much better. It only takes a couple days to feel like myself again versus feeling miserable.
Sure. Yeah, that's such a good point. You've already brought up metabolic flexibility, which I love to talk about. I could talk about that all day. But you talked about if you were to go to the ruins today, you would purposely not eat so that you could have more energy. And I think for a lot of people, that's super counterintuitive. I had a backpacking trip this year where we walked 10 miles into the campsite before we had to set everything up. And I did the same thing. Like purposely, I want to be able to burn stored fat for a 10-mile walk. I know I can do that if I haven't eaten food. So I'm not even going to touch any food until later at night when I'm, sat down around the campfire. I can chill out and relax a little bit. And everybody else around me is eating and snacking. They need to stop. They need to take a break. Like you can see their energy going up and down, where my energy is there. It's just fine. It's so different.
Exactly. It's all a matter of having the energy accessible. Like if you carried food with you on a hike, but you had it in a backpack and there was a padlock on there and you couldn't get in the backpack, you wouldn't be able to eat that food. So it's the same thing, when your body can't access that stored fat for whatever reason, it's not metabolically flexible. You may have all this wonderful energy. You have glycogens, in your muscles and your liver, you have stored fat on your body, but you can't really get to it. If you're not metabolically flexible, especially the fat for fuel. But, I went hiking with my son and his wife. We went to a national park in South Carolina in December when they were here for the holidays. And I did the whole thing in the fasted state. And they're not fasting, which is funny. My son did for a while. He's 22 and they live in San Francisco. They're vegetarians, but he's stopped fasting now that he's working from home. He had done it kind of a little bit, but they get up, they eat breakfast. They carried snacks. They ate lunch before we went while we were at the park. And then they had snacks halfway through. And I'm like, y'all. And I was just fasting the whole time. I didn't eat till we got home, probably about 4 p.m.
Wow.
And I felt great.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's really quite an interesting feeling when you're observing that in other people, yet you just kind of feel really good. I love the analogy you gave. That was a great analogy. And think like the food is there. It's in the backpack and it's even like weighing you down. It's not even doing anything.
Oh, yeah.
You have to drag it along with you.
Yeah. And it's there for us to access and it's not scary. Sometimes people have the misconception because we've been told it for so long that if you don't eat all the time, you're going to start burning your muscle for fuel. But that's not really up high on your body's priority list. We've got all this stored fuel in the form of fat. Let's burn our heart muscle. No, the body's not going to do that.
That's great point. Okay. So you mentioned something really important, and I want to make sure that we address it. And it's that a lot of people, they maybe get intimidated by the word fasting. Like what does fasting mean? Is that different than intermittent fasting or extended fasting? Or, sometimes I like to use the word time restricted eating. For some people, that sounds a little bit nicer. Is there a specific definition of fasting or something that people should be afraid of or nervous about? Or how do you think about those things?
That's a great question. There's a lot of emotion tied into the word fasting. We actually had this exact discussion yesterday in one of my Facebook groups. Someone said that people were turned off when she used the word fasting. And so she'd like to use time restricted eating. And really, someone else said, well, I don't like the idea of restricting my eating. I don't like that word either. So words are powerful, but really the idea of your body can be in really one state or another. You're in the fed state or you're in the fasted state. Now, it's not quite so black and white. It's not like you flip a switch, now you're in the fasted state. It's a little more like a dimmer switch on a light. It's not like a light switch. It's like a light dimmer. But, there's processes you go through when you're getting to the end of the fed state and making the switch over to the fasted state, and then, vice versa. But, we really are all fasting overnight. So we shouldn't be afraid of the word. In fact, we have a word for it that every human knows, and that is breakfast, which means break fast.
That's right.
So we're doing it every day. So when someone says, oh my God, I can't do fasting, like, well, you do. You do it every night, unless you're waking up in the middle of the night to eat. You're not. So you break the fast every day. The only difference is I may wait later in the day to break my fast than you do. But we're all breaking our fast at some point. So time restricted eating is the eating window approach to intermittent fasting. So I want you to think of it as intermittent fasting is a big umbrella term. If you can think in Venn diagrams, I was an elementary teacher for 28 years. I like Venn diagrams. Think of a big circle, and that is intermittent fasting. And then within that intermittent fasting big circle, we're going to have another circle inside there that fits in it. And that's going to be time restricted eating. That's the eating window approach, where you eat every day within a window of time. That's the approach that I use. You would have another circle inside that intermittent fasting circle for alternate day fasting approaches, where you might go for 36 hours and then have a day where you ate for 12. It's alternate day fasting. You're not eating one day, then the next day you're eating, and so forth. A 5-2 would be an approach that fit in that circle. That's where you would have 2 fasting days a week. And then the other days would be, quote, eat normal days, eat normally. 4-3 would be another approach like that. Now, extended fasting, I'm going to put that completely outside the intermittent fasting circle, because extended fasting is different. When you get outside of alternate daily fasting, you're really getting into more extended fasting. And that is not something that I recommend people do frequently. Some people like to do maybe one 72-hour fast a quarter or something, for health benefits. And, there's certainly some validity to that. But keep in mind that the longer fasts, when you get beyond the alternate daily fasting realm, those are going to be for health benefits, not so much for, quicker weight loss, because you really can overfast for your body. I talk about this in Fast, Feast, Repeat. About, the dangers of over fasting. And, here in the United States, we're pretty much known for go big or go home, right? So if it's good to fast for 19 hours, it must be great to fast for 90 hours, but not necessarily.
That's a really good point. So you mentioned a lot of different protocols. We invited you on so that you could just tell us which one to do. So just tell us what to do exactly. And then we'll end the podcast and everybody can go and do that, and they'll be in perfect health because of you and because of coming on this podcast. Which one is the best?
Nice try, Casey, but I know you know what I'm going to say. There isn't one. I wish there was. We're all so very different. If you're in excellent health and you don't have a ton of weight to lose, and if you're a man, especially if you're young, something like 16-8 is probably a good one for you. That would be 16 hours of fasting with an 8-hour eating window. You'll probably, be able to become metabolically flexible pretty quickly, and it'll just be easy and you'll feel great. Whereas let's say you're somebody, like me back when I was obese, 210 pounds, middle-aged woman, yo-yo dieter for years and years. I needed a different approach. I needed a shorter eating window. 16-8 was not likely to give me, weight loss. It never did. Back when I was experimenting from 2009 to 2014, the 8-hour diet book had come out and it promised us lots of things. It promised you could eat, whatever you want, as much as you want, however you wanted during an 8-hour eating window, and you would magically lose the weight. Well, no, that did did not work for me at all. So you've got to know what you're working with your body. If you've been obese or overweight for a long time, you're going to need, more fasting, and probably an alternate daily fasting approach would be really good for you. I talk about all of these in Fast, Feast, Repeat, but it just really depends on your metabolic health, how long you've been struggling, and it takes some of us longer to heal than others.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Tell me if you agree with this or not. I tell pretty much most people, like unless you're, pregnant or breastfeeding, or you've had a history of, eating disorders, kind of questionable, but I'll tell people pretty much anything inside of 24 hours is pretty safe. Would you tend to agree with that?
I would agree with that. Yes. One caveat, if you feel, shaky or nauseous during the fast, that may be a sign that you need to eat. Your blood sugar may be low. Your body's not good at tapping into fat stores yet. So while you're adjusting, pay attention to those signals. You don't want to push through shakiness. You want to go ahead and eat. You can try again tomorrow. But adults that are healthy, we can do this. It's good for us. It's good for our bodies. We have lots and lots of doctors who are doing intermittent fasting. There are a lot of researchers who, once they start researching the benefits, they become intermittent fasters. I think that says a lot.
Yeah, that's a really good point too. You mentioned weight loss is one of the benefits. What are some other benefits that people may notice if they start fasting and seeing success?
Well, I like to call intermittent fasting the health plan with the side effect of weight loss, because, we've all heard, you need to lose weight to get healthy. I actually think it's the other way around. You have to get healthy to lose weight. And the good thing about intermittent fasting is it helps us to become healthy in so many ways. It lowers inflammation. So many of the issues that we face are due to increased inflammation, whether it's, allergies or, metabolic issues, so many things, autoimmune problems. Increased inflammation is a common factor in so many of those things. Insulin levels are also a big factor. And, most people don't even think of insulin outside of the, diabetes paradigm. If you're a type 1 diabetic, you know that your body doesn't produce enough insulin. You have to take insulin shots to manage your blood glucose. Whereas someone with type 2 diabetes may not be insulin dependent, but really that's a disease that starts off as having too much insulin. You become insulin resistant. Most people have heard that terminology before. And the word that really describes having too much insulin is hyperinsulinemia. And I read a really great scientific paper about that. I have it linked in the references section of Fast, Feast, Repeat. But hyperinsulinemia, having too much circulating insulin all the time, is really at the root of so many of the issues that we're facing. So much disease has its start in chronic high levels of insulin. So, getting our insulin levels down, fasting is the best way of doing that. Wow. People have probably heard of low carb or keto, and, those dieters talk about getting insulin down, but with fasting, you get insulin down the most. So it's the best way to lower your insulin levels. Fast, clean, get your insulin down, correct your hyperinsulinemia. You may reverse metabolic syndrome. There are people who had A1C levels that put them solidly in the type 2 diabetic realm. And after living an intermittent fasting lifestyle, they have normal A1Cs. And so, we hear that diabetes is chronic, progressive, can't be reversed, but people are, they have normal levels. And so, you can't really tell me that's not reversing it.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. I mean, think of everything you just said in the context of the pandemic that we're currently going through. Right. All the comorbidities, and what happens in the second phase of COVID when it turns is autoimmune. Your immunity, yep. And your immune system attacks itself. Like that sounds so beneficial, even just for that in our current situation, let alone everything else.
Absolutely.
So awesome.
So, yeah, so intermittent fasting won't prevent you from, getting COVID, for example. You can still get it, but we hope that it will help our bodies deal with the disease much better.
Yeah, that's a great point. So for most of my career, I would use metabolic analyzers to figure out how many calories a person's body was burning, and we would assign them a certain number of calories that they needed to burn. And we would just tell everybody, like, if you eat less than whatever this caloric number is, your metabolism is going to decrease. And if you eat more than this, you'll be able to maintain or increase your metabolism. And so one of the things that took me so long to wrap my brain around was that not eating is vastly different than eating less. Can you explain why fasting doesn't drop your metabolism?
Well, one caveat is that fasting can drop your metabolism, but that's where the over fasting comes in. So let me explain. I'm going to refer to one specific study that really made the light bulb go on for me. And this was a study that they did with people who they fasted for 72 hours. We don't have a lot of research on fasts beyond that because they're just not doing that with people in the lab, setting. I'm going to make you fast for 12 days. No, they're not doing that. But we do have a really solid study with a 72-hour fast where they studied people going through it. So they took their baseline metabolic rate when they were beginning, had them fast for 72 hours and did some measures along the way. And so I want you to imagine, a curve where metabolic rate goes up the mountain like a roller coaster. You're going up. Then at a certain point along the way in this 72-hour fast, metabolic rate peaked and then started to go back down. So by the time they got to 72 hours, the metabolic rate was higher than it had been at baseline when they started, but it was on a downward trajectory. So what that shows us, this is just one 72-hour fast in isolation, but what it shows us was as the fasting continued, metabolic rate went up, but then it started to go back down. So if you continued to fast past that time, on and on and on, eventually your body is going to be lower than baseline because your body's like, help, there's no food coming in. But that also showed me the place where we live with intermittent fasting is in that first part of the curve where the metabolic rate is going up. Your body's tapping into stored fat. You got plenty of fuel. Things are going along fine. And then you eat because we're not fasting long forever and ever. We fast, then we feast, then we repeat. So if you do that, your body should not slow your metabolism over time.
That's very well explained. You also mentioned the name of the title of your book, and it's called Fast, Feast, Repeat. It's not called Fast, Eat a Little Bit, Portion Control, Repeat.
Right. We see that problem with people sometimes, especially women who have restricted for a long time. They tend to still view intermittent fasting as a restrictive diet. And, there's a flip side to that. You don't want to over restrict during intermittent fasting, but you also can overeat. If you overeat, you're not going to see weight loss. So you have to find, your sweet spot right in that intermittent fasting approach where you're not under eating, and trying to diet within your eating window, but you're also not, going crazy and overeating.
So you mentioned women in particular, and I agree. It's such a paradigm shift to tell women, like, you have permission to be satiated, different than fullness. And I talk about this a lot. Like, you can get full, in your stomach with certain foods and you'll stop eating. But if you don't eat the right things, a few hours later, you're going to be starving again. And that's what makes fasting so difficult. But if you're eating to complete satiety, and men are guilty of this as well, but I think it's more prevalent with women that they don't fully give themselves permission to really fully eat a lot of calories, be really satiated to the point that fasting becomes very easy. So tell me a little bit about a little bit more about the feasting side. What kinds of foods do you like to feast, and how do you know that you've had enough?
That's a great question. And, we've just been trained to diet or, from the teenage years or even before, to feel guilty from being full and satisfied. Whereas, that's really how we're supposed to feel after we eat. We're supposed to feel satisfied. That's why it feels good to be satisfied after eating. So satiety is tricky. You can totally lose connection to your satiety signals. Counting calories long term can do that. You don't even know when you've had enough because you've just been using this artificial, number to tell you when you've had enough. I remember back in my calorie counting days, we probably all have them. I would eat more just because I could, because I still had, calories left over. I better eat something else. And that's just one of the things that keeps us from connecting to our satiety signals. One thing that's really important is food quality. And I find that when I eat nutritious foods, real foods, I am much more in tune with my satiety signals. And my body says, oop, that was good. You've had enough. And that's because our bodies are searching for nutrients and not calories. Our bodies want the nutrition. And if you eat, quote, the wrong things, your body is not going to be satisfied because it's like, hello, that wasn't it. Send something else down. And so, the phrase I really like is we're, overfed yet undernourished. You can tell by looking at us when we're overweight and obese that we've had too much to eat, but we could really be so undernourished that our body is crying for nutrition. And so it keeps sending us more signals to eat because it's like, literally starving for nutrition.
That's right. It's so hard to see somebody who is clearly overweight. They have way too much energy already on the body, yet they're still hungry. You wouldn't think that that could exist. And we've created this food system that allows that to be the case.
And they're literally hungry. I was that person. I was hungry. And you try to force down that feeling of hunger and you eat your 100 calorie snack pack that they told you would be a good snack. And then, 20 minutes later, you're starving. Worse than if you hadn't eaten it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's crazy. One of the things I noticed, just again, based on what you just said about being starving, is the change in hunger. And you've kind of mentioned this already today, but tell me what hunger feels like now versus what it felt like before you started fasting regularly.
Well, I talked about the roller coaster before just a minute ago when I was talking about your metabolism, but now I want to talk about the roller coaster of your blood glucose. We've all been hangry, and think about your blood glucose. It's going up and down and up and down. And when it would have a crash, you're starving. That's when you might feel shaky and your body's like, my blood sugar's low, put something in now and you're hangry. Well, that's how you live when you are in the constantly fed state and you're a sugar burner. You wake up in the morning, you have something to eat, then a couple hours later, a snack, and then another snack, and then a lunch, and you just keep going. So you're constantly on that blood sugar roller coaster. You put something in, your blood sugar goes up, then it goes back down and it crashes up and down. And you're constantly, having that cycle throughout the day, and you have to keep ahead of it. And you have to keep putting the fuel in because that's where your body is getting the fuel. Well, when it comes to intermittent fasting, your body learns how to tap into your fat stores for fuel. So I wake up in the morning and my body knows where to go for fuel and I'm fine. And I may have a stomach growl here and there or think, eating might be fun, but, I stay busy. I don't have those crashes during the day. My blood sugar isn't going up and down wildly and crashing. Then when I open my window, I eat food that makes me feel great. And I keep that steady blood glucose, but my body shifts over, to using the food for fuel when I open my window. But I used to be way hungrier when I would eat frequently during the day. And it just had to do with, my body was ready to find a fuel source. And that's why I had to put one in.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I think more people would be willing to try it and get through the first part that's a little bit uncomfortable if they knew what that felt like, because I think most people just know that hunger is hanger. My head is on my desk at 3 p.m. because I'm starving. I have no energy. I have to have a candy bar or a soda or something to get me over that hump versus like, yeah, I'm a little hungry, but there's stuff I like to do. There's clients I like to see. I can go on a walk. I can go on a bike ride. It's such a different feeling.
So much different. It's really, like night and day. And until you've experienced it, you don't really understand it, that you're not just going to, hunger comes in waves during the day. When you're an intermittent faster, you might have a little brief wave and then it goes away.
Yeah.
It doesn't just build and build and build and then you die. No.
Yeah, that's great. How do workouts fit into this kind of way of eating? Is that something you recommend as well?
Again, we just talked about the adjustment period and how that can be tricky. So I wouldn't start intermittent fasting and then also, try to go do your high intensity, training, interval training right there at the beginning. You're going to need to let your body learn how to tap into fat stores before you're going to be well fueled during a workout. But once your body adjusts, you will be well fueled during the workout. I just talked about the hike that I went on. I'm a 51-year-old woman and I hiked for a couple hours through a park in the fasted state and I was fine. And then I drove home and it was over an hour and I was also still fine. and my body has been able to do anything I've asked it to do in the fasted state. So I'm adapted. I've talked to people who do endurance type athletics, marathon type thing. And they can do it in the fasted state if they've trained that way. You're not just going to flip that switch and be able to do it.
Takes time to
build
adjust.
Up to it.
Yeah, that makes sense. That was one of the things that shocked me was an improvement in my endurance. I mean, I would ride my bike and have to have carbs, tons of gels and drinks. And now I don't even take a water bottle. Like, you don't need anything. And I'm faster now than I ever was when I was racing and using all of those products. It's a pretty crazy switch. You made a really good point there that people just need to give it time. You can't do this for a few days and expect it to be really easy. Just ride it out a little bit longer. One of the questions we get asked all the time, I'm sure you get this all the time. Should women eat differently than men?
No.
All right.
With a caveat, here's what I'm going to say about that. Our bodies, men and women both should not live overly restricted. That's not good for the woman's body. It's not good for the male body either. Women, though, we have something that usually signals us. And, that's our menstrual cycle. We have that signal that if you over restrict, your period will stop. And so we know when it's happening. Men don't have a signal that is quite so in your face and obvious as that. So the thing about intermittent fasting is it can be approached as a restrictive way of eating, like I mentioned before, if you're also dieting within your eating window. But that is not how we recommend that anyone do it, man or woman. So we don't recommend anyone do intermittent fasting in an overly restrictive dieting manner, because that's going to send a signal to your body that you're not well fueled over time, men and women. Women just have that, like I said, that hormonal signal that lets us know when it's happening. So, we've got almost 500,000 members in our various Facebook support communities, and the majority of them are women. Just that's the nature of Facebook, I think, and people joining groups, a lot of females. We have wonderful male members as well, but it's predominantly women. And so we have hundreds of thousands of women who are doing intermittent fasting successfully. We may have a few cycle changes at the very beginning as our body adjusts, but most people find that their cycles become more regular and hormonally healthier over time. And that's just what we see over and over again. Also, women who have polycystic ovarian syndrome, PCOS, which is really on the rise now because it's linked to hyperinsulinemia, high levels of insulin. So we find that a lot of women with PCOS find that their cycles regulate in a way they never had before, thanks to intermittent fasting. And even women who had been struggling with infertility find that they suddenly are pregnant after, they've started an intermittent fasting lifestyle. So women should not be afraid of intermittent fasting. You should be afraid of anything that's overly restrictive, but that's not the way we want you to live the intermittent fasting lifestyle.
Perfect. And then you gave us some food recommendations. I find myself in the bias world of the kind of low carb carnivore type community. That's worked well for me and worked for my clients. And I fully recognize that just because that's the route I tend to choose doesn't mean that works for everybody. You seem to be very open and non-dogmatic about nutrition. You mentioned real food. Is that about as complex as it gets for you?
Yes. Although one caveat there too, I have a book that I wrote in 2017 called Feast Without Fear. And I wrote that book because of the dogma that you're talking about. And honestly, it's, I really see that on Instagram a lot. As I'm scrolling through my Instagram feed, I see, people who are carnivore, people who are raw vegan and everything in between. And everyone is so dogmatic about this is the way everyone should be. And clearly the people who are carnivore are happy and doing well and claiming excellent health that they've never had before. And the same is true on the raw vegan side. They're claiming excellent health that they've, better than they've ever felt. And, is one side lying and the other side is right? And then we've got everything in the middle. And so I was like, there's got to be an answer. There's got to be one best way for us to eat. What does the science tell us? Well, I was digging through everything I could find, reading all the books from low fat people, the books from low carb people, and following the science. I ended up on a TED Talk, Dr. Aaron Segal, and the title of his talk is "What is the Best Diet for Humans?" I think that's the title of it. You can find it on YouTube. Dr. Aaron Segal, Eran, he is Israeli. And I watched that video, and that was when I first heard about personalized nutrition, and it blew my mind because he's standing there saying that we all have a different glycemic response to the same foods, for example. Like some people have a really high glycemic response to ice cream, but not to white bread, versus someone else might be the complete opposite. But we've all been trained that, the glycemic index is like a number that's set in stone, and this is what it is. And, then I realized the glycemic index was created because they took a bunch of people, averaged their glycemic response, and gave the average as what the glycemic response was. Well, think about height, for example. What if we said people, that's how tall people were? We took all the people and averaged their height and said, this is how tall you are. Well, clearly that's not how tall we all are. It's the average. Averages really don't say a lot about an individual person. So we're learning more and more now. And there's some fascinating research that's ongoing. I talked about this in Fast Feast Repeat. Dr. Tim Spector, he's out of the UK. He's doing a series of studies called the PREDICT studies. I actually got to take part in PREDICT 3. They have an app called the Zoe app. And I talk about it more at jenstevens.com/Zoe. But it's really has to do with your gut microbiome and also your glycemic response to different foods. They all really play in together. So I just went through a period of time where they tested my gut microbiome to see what was living down there, what the gut bacteria makeup is for me. And that gives a lot of clues to what foods work well for your body and your gut. And then I wore a CGM, or a continuous blood glucose monitor, for a period of time, and I tested different foods that they sent. And, they tested my blood to see how it responded. To make a long story short, I end up with a personalized recommendation of what foods work well for my body. For example, I found out that my body doesn't clear fat very well, unfortunately. That's really sad to me because we all love to eat foods that have plenty of fat, but it gives a big clue as to why keto didn't work well for my body. I always felt inflamed and yucky when I was trying to do keto. I tried that back in 2014. Didn't work well for me. I didn't lose any weight. I felt awful. As soon as I reintroduced carbs, switched to intermittent fasting, that's when my weight loss began. But based on what they know, if your body doesn't clear fat well, eating too much fat is very inflammatory for you. Versus someone else whose body does clear fat well, they can handle a whole lot more. And that's better for them to eat. So it's fascinating to see how different we really all are. So they gave me a list of foods. These are the foods that would work well for me. And I actually followed their exact recommendations for 7 days, and it was amazing. I don't want to track. I don't want to measure. And so I'm not going to do that long term. But, for example, beans, they are really high scoring for my body. And I ate a lot of beans during those 7 days, and I felt fantastic.
Wow. That's super interesting. We'll have to link to all that in the show notes. That's great. There is a word. It's kind of a newer word. We haven't talked about this yet. And it came on the scene a few years ago, and it is so interesting. I love it. Tell us, what is autophagy?
Okay. Yeah. Autophagy. We had never heard of autophagy until, when I say we, I'm talking about people like you and me. Yep. Obviously scientists who were studying it had heard of it, but most of us had not. Even, doctors hadn't heard of it. But then in 2016, the Nobel Prize in Medicine was awarded based on research into autophagy. And then suddenly everyone was talking about it. It's basically our body's recycling and upcycling system. It's the way our bodies kind of clean up in the background, and we can recycle old junky proteins and clean up damaged cell parts, and our bodies are great at doing that. But we have to give them the right environment to do it. If you're constantly in the fed state, your body is all the time focusing on digestion and dealing with processing your meals. Well, if you do intermittent fasting and you're in the fasted state, your body suddenly not doing as much. And it's like, well, nothing's coming in. Well, let me look around and see what I've already got on hand. And it has time to do some cleanup. It's like if you were throwing, a frat party at your house and, hundreds of people were there and they're generating a lot of garbage, you're going to have a big mess. That's like, eating all day long versus, if you have just a couple friends over once a day, you clean up after them and you can keep your house neat. So we don't want to live in constant frat party. We want to have time to clean up. And that's what happens during the fast, and autophagy is upregulated.
That's great. That's a great analogy. I love that. An analogy I'll give to people every now and again, I've used this on the show before, is if you are building a house and you're getting deliveries of bricks all the time, every day, when you break a brick, well, you don't care. You just throw it in the pile in the back and just keep going because new ones are coming. When that delivery stops, you have to be a lot more resourceful, and you have to go back to that pile of bricks and start to maybe, put two together, make these two work, and recycle those things to make good new bricks. And I think of that the same way. And this is part of why anybody who attempts intermittent fasting, I really try to get them to take a before and after picture. Take some pictures on your phone. Don't share them with anybody. Just have them, because you will be amazed. Not only will you lose weight, but you will look vastly different as your body is cleaning up not only the fat, but also, the rest of those junky proteins. Skin. You can make your skin tighter, smoother. It's like the best anti-aging thing you could ever find.
Absolutely. We see that in the before and after photos in the groups. People will share them, and people who are new will say, wow, these photos are almost unbelievable because everyone looks so much younger. It's like we've discovered the fountain of youth.
That's right. Yeah. It looks like some of these people that have lost, 100 pounds, they look like they've never been overweight a day in their life. They look great.
Right.
That's awesome.
I mean, that's me. I lost over 80 pounds and, I don't look like you would not know it by looking at me.
So cool. Let's tell a new listener, is there anything they need to do to prepare to start fasting, or should they just start with wherever they are?
That's a great question. I have something in Fast, Feast, Repeat that I would encourage all new people to get that book and find the 28-day fast start chapter. You can go straight to that first and then go back and read the part before it. But you need to think about yourself. Some people are a rip the Band-Aid off kind of person. You can just start, like say you want to do 19.5, you're just going to do it. Day one, you're doing it, you're fine. Whereas other people, especially someone who's been obese for a while, or you're pretty sure you're metabolically inflexible, you may need to have an easier ease-in type approach. Train your body to burn fat for fuel and take your time with it, or maybe somewhere in between. The number one thing I want everyone to focus on is the clean fast. Your first goal is to nail the clean fast. And what do I mean by the clean fast? For me, there are 3 goals that you have while fasting. And once you understand those 3 goals, then you know why to fast clean. The first one is you want to keep your insulin low. I've talked about that before. We want our insulin low. That helps us tap into our fat stores, because high levels of insulin actually keeps us from tapping into fat stores, because insulin is anti-lipolytic. So keep your insulin low. Insulin's for storing. Low insulin, you're able to get your fat stores back out again. And we keep our insulin low by avoiding anything that makes our brain think that food is coming in. Obviously, eating food would be the wrong thing to do, because that would not be fasting. But there are a lot of things, that we think are okay, like, a diet soda, or, putting lemon juice in your water, or even a lemon wedge, because your brain senses that as food coming in. We taste the sweetness of the diet soda. We have a cephalic phase insulin response, which is our brain saying, oop, sugar's coming in. Well, of course it isn't. We're having a diet soda, but your body doesn't understand, artificial sweeteners. So insulin goes up. And that's the opposite of what we want to do during the fasted state. So avoid anything that tastes sweet or tastes like food or is food, or anything that might make your body think food is coming in. Fasting goal number 1. Fasting goal 2 is we want to tap into our stored body fat for fuel. So you want to avoid taking in other sources of fuel. There's a train of thought that, well, MCT oil, butter, they're fat. They're not going to raise my insulin a lot. So I'm just going to take those in, and my body's going to make ketones out of those, out of that stored fuel, or out of that, MCT oil, or out of the butter in my coffee, and I'll have great energy. Well, that's true, but you're getting the energy from your coffee cup instead of from your body. Your body can make ketones from your stored body fat, and that's really what we want to have happening during the fast. The goal is not to have ketones. The goal is to make them from stored body fat. That's where you have your great mental clarity and your great energy. So if you're constantly taking in sources of fat in your coffee or in your beverage, you're not having to tap into your fat stores at all. And so that doesn't even make any sense when you think about it. Also avoid taking in ketone supplements. You don't need those. You don't want to take them in. You want to make them. And again, when you take these things in, your body isn't having to scrounge around and make them for you from your stored fat. And fasting goal number 3 is to increase autophagy. And we know that protein, if you ingest protein, that turns off autophagy. So that's why you don't want to drink bone broth. That's a source of protein. So avoid things like that during the fast. So to fast clean, you stick to plain water. It can be sparkling or still, just don't add anything to it for flavor, just plain. And, for some people, it may have been years or decades since they just drank plain water.
Wow.
People have to adjust their taste buds to that.
That's right.
You can have black coffee, plain tea. Don't add anything to it. Don't drink the flavored varieties. Don't drink, all those herbal teas that actually are sweet or flavored. Avoid all of those. Just keep it really simple. A bitter flavor profile is not associated with insulin response. And that's why black coffee and plain tea are fine for most people.
That's great advice. We've already talked about your podcast. You do a podcast, Intermittent Fasting Stories, where you hear real people tell the real stories. And I'm going to put you on the spot here. Just the first one that comes to your mind. What's a standout story that you're really, happy about, excited about? That it could be just the first one that comes to your mind.
Oh gosh, there's so many going through my mind. I mean, of course, the ones I just did, I just talked to a professional football player, an ex-professional football player, who talked about how he uses intermittent fasting. I've talked to personal trainers, and even someone who, works in that role for a professional basketball team. I've talked to doctors. I've talked to an OBGYN who uses intermittent fasting with her patients. And I mean, so many people, I just really, stories that make you cry, stories that make you cheer, people who have faced death of a spouse or death of a child and used intermittent fasting as part of their healing. There are just so many. I think I recorded number 142 today, and I've been asked that before, but I can't pick a favorite because they're all so special. And, even the person who, quote, only needed to lose 10 pounds, but finally found food freedom. That's a huge story for that person. The person who needed to lose 200 pounds. It's just, all of them are inspiring in a different kind of a way. So I can't pick one. It's like, when you have a bunch of kids, you love them all.
Pick your favorite.
I can't pick a favorite.
Well, that's great. I can't recommend that podcast enough. It's very, very good. It's really heartwarming. You really do a great job capturing those stories. It's one of my favorites to listen to. Tell us about your new podcast. What made you decide that 2 podcasts was not enough and you needed to do a third one?
I know that sounds crazy. My third podcast, I do it with my friend, Sherry Bullock. She's the co-host, and Sherry actually was talking to me. We've been friends for years, and she called me and she said, I would like to start a podcast. Can you help me? And she was, troubleshooting, how do I get started? And I was giving her a lot of advice, and she's like, well, I would like to have maybe guest co-hosts here and there. And it's not an intermittent fasting podcast. Then all of a sudden the light bulb went off, and I'm like, oh, I would like to talk about things that aren't fasting too. And I'm not trying to, horn in on your fun here, but would you have me? She was like, yes, I would. So we were so excited to decide that we could do it together, because she's a friend. You know, she goes to the beach with me, and she roomed with me on one of the Delay Don't Deny cruises that we had. And she and I are just great friends. And when we get together, we talk nonstop. So,
might as well record it.
About everything. Yes. So we really are friends. And, you know, she works in healthcare, and she's a bit of a biohacker herself. And she, really smart person, and great at practical solutions, and wants to help others. So, you know, we connected through that, and our podcast is called Life Lessons. And, you know, we formed a Facebook community. We're right about 8,000 members of that community. And, you know how Seinfeld was the show about nothing? We're the podcast about everything, except politics. We're going to avoid politics completely, politics and religion. We're not going there.
Thank you.
Other than that, whether you're liberal, conservative, or politically agnostic, our podcast is for you, because we're not even going to talk about that. And like today, our episode that came out was about kitchen hacks, but we're also going to talk about serious things like seasonal affective disorder and forming habits. And we talked about movies and playing games and just really anything you can think of. You know, money matters. We're going to talk about menopause in an upcoming series. So something for everybody.
I love it. I just finished that episode about habits, and I really got a lot out of it. It was a really fun, informal, enjoyable conversation. I felt like I was in the room with you guys, just talking. It's great. It's a great show. Tell us a little bit about.
We have a good news segment that we like to share every time, and things like that. So it's just positive and uplifting. Really, is our goal.
That's great. It definitely accomplishes that goal for sure. It's great. Tell us a little bit about the book you're working on.
Oh, well, I can't say too much about it.
We'll stay tuned.
You're going to have to stay tuned. I don't know what I'm allowed to say yet. My editor likes for me to keep it a little hush-hush early on, but I'm really excited about it. It is not about intermittent fasting, although there is a chapter on intermittent fasting in it. And it's going to be full of practical information that you can use, because that's, I'm a teacher at heart. I taught school for 28 years. And even in my intermittent fasting work and in my Life Lessons podcast, I like to teach you things. That's what I'm trained to do. I can learn information, put it together, break it down, and redeliver it to you. That's what I'm trained to do. And that's my expertise is teaching. So I'm going to teach you about something that's not new to you, but I'm going to teach it in a new way, and you can apply it to your life in a way maybe you couldn't. So stay tuned.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to leverage this and tell you that you don't have to talk about your book today, but you do have to come back on sometime when it's out so that we can talk about it then. Is that fair?
Well, I would love that. I actually talked to my editor yesterday. I'm up against a hard deadline of end of March of 2021, but we're looking at an early 2022 release.
Cool.
So
that's great.
I would love to come back.
Awesome. We'll be tuned in for that. This has been an awesome conversation. I've certainly learned a lot. I've had so much benefit in my life from involving fasting, and it's a tool that I wish more people would use. What is one simple thing that you would want somebody to know walking away from this conversation that they could use in their life immediately?
Fast, clean, and release expectations. You start fasting, fast, clean, and, let your body guide you, and it will amaze you. Don't look at it as quick weight loss, because it's not. In the 28-day fast start approach, in Fast Feast Repeat, I actually tell people do not expect to lose any weight in the first 28 days. You might even gain some weight. So stay off the scale. I can remember when I was going through the editing process and the publishing process, they were, looking for the sound bites to promote the book. And they're like, well, what should we tell people to expect? How much can they lose? They were expecting me to say some big number. And I said, 0 pounds. And they're like, oh, that's not what we had in mind. But I want people to think of intermittent fasting, as I said before, the health plan with the side effect of weight loss. And this can change your life, but you have to have the idea that it's a lifestyle, and you have to understand all the things that are going on behind the scenes. For example, one of the stories that stands out to me is my friend Roxy that I interviewed. She's a moderator in my group, and she didn't lose any weight for months and months and months. Months and months she was doing intermittent fasting, and she could have said, this doesn't work, I quit. But actually, before she started, she had been diagnosed with fatty liver disease, and all those months of not losing weight at all, she went back to the doctor. Her fatty liver was 100% reversed.
Wow.
So did intermittent fasting work for her? Yeah. It reversed her fatty liver. Now she's losing weight. But she had to go through, I mean, if you just look at the scale as your only metric of success, you might miss out on, reversing fatty liver disease, which I think is a lot better than how your pants fit.
Absolutely. Wow. Yeah, that's so awesome. Where would you like people to go to find your work?
Well, you can go to jenstevens.com and there are links to everything there. Jen is spelled like gin and tonic, and Stevens has a PH, jenstevens.com. Find me there. My podcasts are everywhere you can find podcasts. If you search using my name, Jen Stevens, they'll all come up. Plus all the ones I've been a guest on.
Which is a lot. Let me tell you.
It is a lot. Yeah.
In preparation for this podcast, I found just mountains of content and information, and we're so grateful for you to put that out there, to learn something that worked in your life, but not only just keep it to yourself, but share it with others. And I want to close this conversation with a quote. This comes from your new podcast, and it says, "Let's live our best lives one day at a time, and let's have some fun along the way." That to me,
I love it.
Oh, that to me just really encompasses you and your work and the lightness and the brightness that you bring to life and share with others. And I'm really grateful for it. And I know my clients are as well. We're grateful for you for spending time with us today. So thank you very, very much. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me.
It was an absolute pleasure. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio. As always, thank you so very much for listening to Boundless Body Radio. It's really inspiring and amazing to see some of the reviews that we have been getting, and also to receive so many messages and emails about how these episodes have improved our listeners' lives. And so thank you so very much. We are so happy to bring these episodes to you and provide them for free. And we really hope that they help you in your life. We have just passed 2 major milestones, which is absolutely mind-blowing to me. And basically, we did both of these in pretty much the exact same day. We have just passed 100,000 downloads worldwide of Boundless Body Radio, and we have just launched our 250th episode, which is absolutely amazing. Like I said, I never imagined we could reach that many people. We always want to keep you updated on things that we're doing on our website. So if you go to myboundlessbody.com, you can always see what we're up to. This month, we have a link that you can go and schedule a functional movement screen, which we do virtually over Zoom. A functional movement screen is a series of 7 different movements and 3 different clearing tests, which is designed to find weak links in the body, such as muscle imbalances and joint stability issues. It's a really great tool for discovering inefficient movement, and even if you're not experiencing pain in certain areas of your body, it's something that can prevent injury later on. Some muscles need to be stretched, some need to be strengthened, and we can help you create a plan around that so that you can stay healthy and continue to move well for the rest of your life. So again, you can go and schedule that at myboundlessbody.com. You will also see the other services that we offer. You can always schedule a complimentary 30-minute consultation with us to really chat about anything that you like. And remember, if you are enjoying Boundless Body Radio, please take a minute, give us a rating or review on Apple. It really helps get this passion project out to other people. And thank you again for tuning into Boundless Body Radio.